All right, I call this meeting to order. And first thing on our agenda tonight is to introduce our newest cable board member, Giovanni. Some of you already know him, obviously.
Some of them do know me, yes. I think. Yeah. I know Steve knows me a little bit. Blake knows me there. And she already knows.
Hi, how are you doing, Charles?
Well, we welcome you very much. Thank you.
It's good. I'm good to.
Blessing to the board.
Glad to be here.
Okay, let's move to item 2, which is the approval of last meetings. Oh, I'm sorry.
But wait, let's give Mr. Hakani an opportunity to introduce himself.
Oh, well, that would be great.
Yes.
Would you like to introduce yourself to
Absolutely.
everyone?
I think some of them might already know me. I know Rick knows me. Steve knows me a little bit. And see, I know Steve back there. I haven't met you yet, but my name is Giovanni Alexander Hakani.
Maybe you need to speak up a little bit.
Yes, I am going to speak up a little bit. I know my voice is a little bit hoarse from driving in the traffic there. But I grew up in Albuquerque and spent many years here. Went to high school and went to college abroad, but I didn't go to college here. I spent many years here as a community activist. Been involved in my community for many years on various things, from dealing with park situation, parks and recreation, things like that, and any other community issues that came up through the years. I kind of dealt with it, and lately I've been involved a little bit in politics, and I ran for office 2 years ago for state rep. Unfortunately, I didn't win, but hopefully there's always another time, and that's also, the idea is to serve, so I enjoyed the run. I was very grateful to run, and I think since they say once it gets in your blood, it's very difficult to give it up. So, Mayor Keller asked me to be on this board, and I said I'll be honored to, and hopefully I can be an asset to the board and to the community, and serve as long as I can. And I think that's basically, I'll put that's as far as I'll go right now, because I know we have an agenda. So I won't spend any more time on me.
Well, thank you.
Enough of that.
Okay, approval of the minutes. Have you had a chance to just review them?
Yeah, I wasn't here for those.
Let's take just a few minutes just to double check and see if everything pans out here.
I think there's a correction in item 3. It's not semi-monthly, but bi-monthly, I think is what it was meant to say.
Semi-monthly. Okay. Yeah, that would certainly need to be repaired. Danielle, did you hear that? Item 3 on the minutes from last month, down toward the bottom of the paragraph, it says instead of semi-monthly, it probably should read bi-monthly.
Well, it's a little bit inconsistent here, but in item 4, we
Right,
did
it has
clarify that by saying the board will decide the issue whether to increase the cable board meeting frequency from bi-monthly, parenthesis,
Right,
defining it as every other month,
right.
to monthly. So, I would think that if it would please the board, you could just cross that out and write it in, and that way we can get
That'll
it
be all right?
signed. Yeah,
All right. I just want to make sure the i's are dotted, t's are crossed here.
that's a good point. Point well taken, thank you.
Okay. And I think,
Well, I move to approve the minutes of the February 20th meeting with the amendment in paragraph or under item 3.
I second that.
all right. It's been moved and seconded. Meetings have been approved. And moving right along. It's time for some public comment. We have quite a grouping today. That's really wonderful. I don't know who's on the list right now. Can I have that up here? Thank you very much. All right. Steve, you're number one, buddy. Would you like to come up and sit down?
Or we can just stay right here, I can speak loud enough.
That would be fine too.
I just more of, is that you just want a Reader's Digest of who I am and why I'm here?
Okay.
Is that, basically, I've been in conjunction with U Public running Channel 26, 24/7 sports channel, ProView Networks. I've been doing it for 1 year, 18 months now, a little longer than 18 months, almost 2 years.
Wow.
And we've been providing 45 hours of programming per week for Channel 26. So the reason I'm here is just concerned about the RFP and where the future of it's going to go and where ProView Networks fits in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
And did you have a comment, or?
I'm just here to listen and observe morally. I think maybe open for discussion after I hear everybody else, maybe.
All righty. Is that Danny?
Possibly Danny Kelly?
Dan Kelly?
Okay.
Okay. How about Paul? Paul, you can sit there, you can come up. What would
Oh,
you?
why am I here?
Yeah, well, I'd like to,
Oh.
it's time for, to hear from the public, and we'd
Okay.
like to hear what you
Fair
have to
enough.
say.
Interested, just moved to Albuquerque a couple years ago, and been kind of curious with respect to Comcast's pricing policy, so I figured I'd come here and understand a little more about the relationship between Comcast and Albuquerque.
Okay. Very well. Simon? Would you like to stay there or come front?
I can stay here.
All righty.
I don't know exactly I haven't looked at the agenda of the meeting. I heard that there's a RFP that's being publicized. I know that I had a program with Channel 27 with, under a different the preceding management that is managing it, a live show. I went to the present management some years ago asking to have a live show, and they told me I couldn't have it. I don't know if that's because they're incompetent or they don't want to work that hard. I don't know, whatever the reason. But before I didn't have that problem. I also did a call-in, and the man I met with basically told me I will decide what shall be shown on public access television. And the way I understand public access television, you're free to do whatever you want as long as you're within FCC, is it FCC?
CC.
Yeah, FCC guidelines, which I believe I was, and I found that to be a violation of my First Amendment rights of freedom of expression. I didn't pursue it because I didn't want to, I thought about maybe filing a suit against the city and against Channel 27 or the operators or the city, because the city in the end is responsible for it. I watched some of the programming that was put on by the present management team. I don't know if they fulfilled their contractual obligations. I don't know how long it took. I know they've been operating it for 5 years. I believe that, if you can't get up to full operation within a certain specified time of what you're required to do, that should disqualify you from operating a public access channel. I mean, I worked in construction, and subs were fired because they were delaying a project. And there were no ands, ifs, or buts about it. I mean, they were costing. And I think when it comes to issues such as freedom of speech and censorship, you know, there should be no censorship in public access. I mean, it's a podium. I mean, I don't think anybody should be censored for their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, their sexual orientation. It should be a podium for the average person to reach a wider audience because, you know, it's non-commercial. If you want to reach a wide audience in commercial TV, you have to have deep pockets. And public access provides people with no money in their pocket, basically. So that's a great thing. And it's a thing that it should be cherished by whoever operates public access. And the city, because we are supposedly a democracy, and a democracy is measured by the amount of dissent which is allowed. When you start curtailing people's freedom of speech and expression, you know, you're going against everything that's called, you know, that the Constitution sets up to be the First Amendment, the First Amendment. And I was told, like I said, I'm going to reemphasize, by the man I spoke to, I will decide what is content, and no live TV. And I never had that problem before. And I believe that whoever is chosen in this process of management, next management, we should look at their record. How long did it take them to fulfill these contractual agreements? What did they follow FCC guidelines? And do they really provide public access? And I think everybody, it should be determined. I mean, the present operator had no experience. And when I was at City Council, one of the people, the Chief Administrative Officer, admitted they had no experience whatsoever. He admitted it right there in front of council and public. And he said, well, we're not taking that into account. And when you hire somebody, the first thing you look at their resume is you look at their experience, because that tells you what they are capable or not capable of. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you, son. There are others here. Would anybody else like to speak? Okay. Well, that's okey dokey. Thank you all for your comments. At this point, we're going to, the board will discuss our the timing of our meetings, meaning how often we meet. At this point, I'd like to make a recommendation, and that it's not a motion. I just want to recommend for discussion that we're looking at doing it monthly. But I propose that we do it monthly until the franchise agreement is a done deal. So if it takes a year and a half or whatever it takes, we can go monthly. But as soon as the franchise agreement has taken over or has been signed, that we move back to bi-monthly.
I like that idea. That'll work for me.
How do you feel?
As long as, yeah, once the franchise is in place, I think then we're good to go back to the month and a, wasn't it month and a half, I think you all remember?
2 months.
2 months. Okay, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, all right. So I move that this board meet monthly, beginning next month, and until such time as the cable franchise agreement between Comcast and the city has been signed and agreed upon by both parties.
I second that motion.
All right, it's been seconded. Any other discussion?
No.
All right, then the motion of going monthly until the agreement has been approved.
So I'm just,
Sure.
when will be the next one? I know you have April 20th.
It says April 10th currently. which is pretty quick up onto now.
Correct.
That's good discussion. Well, we're gonna back up a bit in that,
So, I have a question for Jane. When are the proposals due? Is there a deadline for the RFPs?
I have not been able to get that
April 27th.
answered, but some of you may
Yeah.
have looked at it already, and we're not registered, so we cannot download it, and I haven't read it. What is the
27th.
deadline on the RFP?
April 27th.
April 26th, I don't know.
When is it?
Either the 26th or the 27th.
I got it in
April?
here, I can tell you here in a second. I got
Is it
Yes.
of April?
Yes.
Okay,
So that's
They're,
when they're due.
yes.
Okay. Well, I kind of don't think there's a good reason to meet as early as April the 10th. And would kind of think more like around the 20th, like we are now.
I agree. Danielle, what is the Tuesday and around the 20th of April?
24th? 27, just before.
It'd be the 17th or the 24th.
24th is a.
The 24th would probably be,
Just before
Yeah.
they're due.
you know,
Or we could
how do
wait
you
till
feel about
after.
that? Are you thinking the 17th or the 24th?
Either of those. 24th is fine too.
Yeah, that gives us pretty close to a month, maybe a month and a week.
24 sounds better, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, would you like to make a motion on that?
I move our next meeting be on April the 24th at 5:30.
I second that.
All right. We will be meeting on the 24th of April, and then, okay, that's more discussion. Does that mean that, is that the fourth Tuesday of the month?
Yes. Did we make a
That should be the
resolution? It would
fourth
be the
Tuesday,
third
yes.
Tuesday? I don't think we did that.
It's, you know, point of information, the board can postpone or change a regular meeting, so the next meeting is a regular meeting. And it would, it's
April 10th.
scheduled to be April 10th, but we have plenty of time to put out a notice that that meeting has been postponed until April 24th. And we'll call that a special meeting, but it's actually taking the place of a regular meeting. And we'll prepare the notices so that we're in
Okay.
compliance, and we get the information out to the public.
Okay, so we can set up just April's in this format rather than trying to dictate
Yes,
the rest of them.
yes, but you might want to also do that and to, you know, give people better notice. Do you
Okay.
want to think forward a little bit, 2 or 3 months?
Okay,
What is the regular meeting, the regular meetings that are scheduled after
April.
April?
June 12th, August 14th, October 9th, December 11th.
August and then December?
August, October 9th,
Oh, October 9th, I missed that. one.
December 11th.
Okay.
Okay, so it's the second Tuesday normally,
Yes.
yes. Do we want to turn around from April to May into the second Tuesday?
Well, second Tuesday in May would be maybe 8th. Like a week from
Yeah, it's
the
just-
April meeting.
Yeah, we got 2 weeks to that one, is that right?
Mhm.
24. And then the top, yeah. So that'd be, a week and a half. And then we'd get back on regular second Tuesdays.
Or you could, I don't know, can we move it to
Do you want to move the regular
Move the
meetings?
regular meetings
Sure.
to the third?
Yeah, we can
Tuesday.
do that. We'll do a new resolution. So which Tuesday do you want it to be on?
Now that you've got the room scheduled for all the other Tuesdays, and now we have to go
Well,
back and
we'll try.
reschedule.
We'll work it. out.
Okay.
It's a big building.
All right,
We'll find a place.
all right.
We can always meet in the council chambers.
Oh, yeah, that'd be
That's
fun.
kind of big, but, you know, there are options.
Okay.
It's probably better to think it through, even though you thought it through once, and now you're gonna think it through again. It's easier, I think, for the public
Mhm.
if you have more of a set schedule. And this is why the city has these resolutions for the boards and commissions, where you set a schedule down the road so that people can make plans to come to them.
Sure.
Okay.
So what would you like to do?
How about
Let's go back to April.
compromise here?
Yeah.
We're originally scheduled to be on April the 10th. That's the second Tuesday. It's, what, 2 weeks from today?
We also
Three
talked
weeks
about
from today.
the 17th, which would be almost a month. Go back and rework the 17th, which would then be if we did the 17th, then we've got 1 week, 2 weeks. Oh, wait, that's March, sorry. Yeah. 1 week, 2
We're here,
weeks,
so-
3, yeah, it'd be the,
1, 2, 3, 4.
so it would be a month.
And
But
then we
going
would be
from
coming
here,
back.
it'd be
1,
1, 2, 3, and then we'd be back on, in May, we'd be back on the
Tuesdays.
second Tuesdays. I'm not leaving you out.
No, I need to ask Jane, how far in advance do we have to schedule the rooms?
Well, these resolutions usually set the meetings for a year. And that's currently how these meetings are scheduled through December of
Oh, I see.
2018.
Okay. So it's on a yearly basis?
Yes.
Wow.
So how does, if we, instead of doing the 24th, we do the 17th next month, that will be a month out to the next one, and then from there on, we move back to the second Tuesday. So next month would be a special meeting, moved from the
10th.
The 10th to the
This-
17th, is that right?
Did we agree on
Mhm.
17th or 24th?
Well, that's what we're trying to work through.
Because I just put 24th in my thing here.
Yeah,
I better
sorry.
remove it.
Right, we might, that's what we're revisiting, because I kind of think we should get back to the regular second Tuesday of the month, and try to make that the permanent thing rather than shift the whole rest of the year's schedule. How does that sound, Sandy?
I think considering how much trouble it was for Jane to get this room, we should probably
Yeah.
stick to the
I was
second
concerned
Tuesdays.
about the room because I know it's
Yeah.
difficult to get this room. It's not-
Okay, so, okay, to recap, we're revisiting instead of the 24th, as we discussed earlier and voted on, we're looking at now moving it back to the 17th as a special meeting instead of the 10th.
Okay.
And then in May, we pick back up with the regular schedule with the added monthly meetings, which would be on the second Tuesday of each month.
Mr. Chair, 17th is the tax day. I'm just saying, I don't know if anybody
Yeah,
needs to
no.
consider that or something. It's just, that's what,
Does that sound,
to me, it don't make any difference. I'm good with that, so.
All right, I move to amend my last motion to have a special meeting on April the 17th,
17th.
and from thereafter, we'll go back to the second Tuesday of each month.
Okay. Okay, I'll second that.
all right.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion on this?
God, please no.
All right. The meeting has now been moved for April to the 17th as a special meeting, and from then on will be the second Tuesday of every month till the franchise agreement is, the contract is signed. All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I notice our next item, Comcast renewal, has public participation and development recommendations. But I was hoping that we would hear from Jane before we did item number 5 about where we are in the drafting of the ordinance and the negotiations and the RFP.
Okay, so on the Comcast ordinance, the first issue or the first topic of housekeeping is this handout that we prepared. This was introduced, it's ordinance 18 for 2018-13, and it was introduced by Councilor Jones to extend the expiration date for an additional 6 months to April 1 of 2018. And internally, we have discussed the city's desire to actually finish those negotiations before October. And at this point, the only thing left to do before our contracted lawyer, Nan Winter, meets with Comcast is she has one meeting with the new city attorney. His name is Esteban A. Aguilar. And we are meeting, Nan and I are meeting with Steve about the Comcast renewal on Thursday. And at that point, I think that what Nan is looking for is some direction on the kind of strategy, you know, whether we're prioritizing topics or prioritizing items within topics. And so I think that I've shown you these before. These are the city's negotiating items, and these are the ordinance sections that achieve these objectives. And so at one point, the attorney Nan Winter was suggesting that the city prioritize, you know, each of these topics. And some of the segments of the city government did prioritize, and some of the priorities, as you can imagine, INET is a very important priority for the Department of Technology and Innovation, and, you know, generally for the government, because we want to maintain the network and maintain our control over the network, and be able to use that network without added expense. You know, because a city has been using that INET since 2002 without paying any fee for the access. And
Excuse me, prior to that, did we pay a fee?
no, but I don't think that prior to that it really wasn't that much of an issue. This INET was really built after the last franchise agreement was entered into. And you know, just to recap, the priorities in terms of the topics are the INET, the PEG channels, maintaining the PEG channels, being more precise on the gross revenues and the franchise fees, how those are calculated. That is actually something that was brought home by the auditor, and the auditor felt that the city needed to impose more financial controls on the gross revenues and franchise fees paid by Comcast. And another item of concern for the city is customer service standards and billing. And you know, I think that really actually comes either on top as a major priority of the people that work within government, to prioritize customer service standards and billing. Sometimes it's for the Department of Technology and Innovation, they put INET as their primary concern, but consumers underneath it. And city council would tend to prioritize customer service because they are customer service standards and billing, because they're sort of the front end of the city government, dealing with our constituents.
Right.
And so you can understand that. Technical compliance issues, that kind of, I don't know, that kind of goes with the INET. And also net neutrality, so we have included that as one of our objectives. So the purpose of the meeting with Nan Winter is, again, to get the final word on the direction. And so I'm happy to report that the negotiating team has decided that rather than take the Comcast ordinance, which they, provided us a very stripped down version of the Colorado ordinance, that the city will present the city's proposed ordinance in its entirety. So then it's not a question of prioritizing the topics, it's more a question of prioritizing which underneath each topic can be negotiated. And that really makes sense, because all the topics that I've listed are really important. I can't say that any one of them should not be on the table for negotiations. So that's the status. The ordinance is, I think that after the meeting on Thursday, then I can email you the one that we're sending to Comcast.
That'd be terrific.
Yeah, but it's going to be very close to the one that I already gave you.
Okay.
All right, the ones, there are two of them. One is a master ordinance and one is grant of authority.
This thing?
Yes.
Okay.
But for the one with the yellow highlighting.
Right, and I didn't bring that one. It's in there somewhere. May I ask some questions, Jane?
Sure, and so, I think that when we were talking about the agenda, I think that the first and foremost, the board would probably want to start digging in right now on what kind of recommendations you want to make to the negotiating team, to the mayor's office, and to the city council.
Okay.
On the ordinance and what it should include.
Okay.
And so
We can certainly do that.
And we can put that in the form of a resolution. And you don't have to comment on the whole thing at once. You can make a comment for say, we can prepare something for the next meeting after your discussion today and vote on it next month. Or you could come up with a resolution today, and we could type it up and have you sign it and forward it to the mayor's office and council.
Okay.
Because we have talked about the ordinance to a large extent, and you're welcome to make those recommendations now.
I think we all like the ordinance that the legal department has drafted. I'm not sure, though, that Giovanni has seen it.
I have read through it. Jane gave me a copy of it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have read through it. Not in the entirety, but I have read through it.
Okay.
So I did familiarize myself with what
Yeah, it's,
it consists of. So, and there is a lot of things I'm concerned about on my own. I brought some of them in when I had the orientation with Jane, having to do with consumer bill of rights.
mhm.
Those were the top priority, because from my own personal experience, that's what came up every time I knocked on the door with my own campaign during And that was one of the top items that we were talking to people about, utilities, and then cable came out. And they
Mhm.
talked about the cable rates going, and we can't negotiate rates with them because of the lawsuit they had filed with the FCC. But we could possibly debate that and see if there is a way, and Jane could guide us on that, if there is a way to actually negotiate, because there's a lot of families that are low income, and since the cable or Wi-Fi, which is all converging now into one technology, has become a necessity rather than a luxury. So I think these things have to be revisited. Comcast could get a pass this time, but I think down the road, we're gonna face a constituency or a city that would be asking us to
Mhm.
look into that very strongly, because it's not a privilege anymore. So those were the things that were on top of my head right now. I'm just saying it. I wrote a few things there.
Okay.
So
So we
I,
could-
I was thinking a couple of things. One is that we probably, I feel like we ought to resolve to encourage the adoption of the ordinance drafted by our legal in its entirety. And another thought I had was this, very similar to yours, Giovanni, that we ought to make a recommendation in our resolution that the top priority be consumers, their rights, and the rates,
Mhm.
and a complaint process.
And we have a problem there with the negotiating rates with them. I know we can't, and they'll come back with another lawsuit saying we can't. But I think there is a way to debate that at this point, because the technology is converging. So
Well,
when that lawsuit was filed many years ago in 2010, Wi-Fi and all that stuff was just barely starting to kick in. So I think we could revisit that. That would be my. And
Yeah,
I
it was
would-
actually 2001.
2001 or
Yeah,
2010?
no, the last ordinance, it was a 15-year term, and so it was negotiated in 2001, and it was enacted in 2002.
Am I not remembering correctly, though, that we can ask Comcast that they cannot bump up their rates in an excessive amount of time, like there's a limit for how many times?
Yes,
they can bump up within a
that's
year?
provided for in the draft ordinance that we drafted, yes. And so we're saying that any increase more frequent than 1 year exceeds the reasonable expectations of a reasonable consumer, and therefore is a violation of the ordinance.
Now, that's very ambiguous. How do you nail something like that down? Some person's gonna come and say, yeah, $5 increase is way too much. Another person would say $50 is way too much. So how do you nail down a reasonable value?
Well, that's a good question, but what is written in the ordinance is not how much the increase is, because the city lost the ability to regulate the basic tier rates.
Right.
And that actually occurred in 2010.
And that's what I was referring to.
Oh,
The
okay,
2010
I'm
lawsuit.
sorry. The
Yeah,
ordinance
yeah.
was issued in 2001, but the.
You know, the lawsuit that
but
Comcast
the
filed with the
FCC,
FCC. was
yeah.
The
about-
FCC came down because
Yeah.
of the DirecTV.
Yes, in 2010. I'm sorry, I think I'm
No,
having
no,
trouble hearing.
I should have clarified, it was an actual lawsuit that they had filed.
Yes,
because-
Comcast filed that lawsuit
Correct.
against
We
the
lost
city.
it.
And we lost.
Correct.
And what's written in the draft ordinance is not that Comcast cannot increase the rates, but to an individual consumer, it cannot increase the rate more often than once a year.
So it boils it down to individual as opposed to the entire, everybody taking on cable in the
Well,
city.
So as far as the overall prices go, we borrowed from Seattle, Washington, the practice of, and it's Comcast over there. They have maybe 3 companies in Seattle, but Comcast is one of them, and it does post its prices every year. Now, we borrowed that idea that every year they have to post a new schedule of prices. We're not suggesting in the ordinance, I was careful to avoid saying that they can raise prices every year, but they do have to post their prices every year. And so that for the system-wide, I think that that does create some kind of stability and notice to everyone. And what they have in Seattle is they have the rates for 2018. So they say the year.
Now,
Now-
how does that affect Comcast when they mid-year do a special? And it's good, they have to sign a contract for a year, the individual. And at the top of the next year, their rates go up. So is that, are you saying that that individual is still, it
Is still
can't be,
enjoying the
that
low-
individual can't have his contract changed just
Right.
because they raised the
Absolutely.
rate?
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, it's hard to project this, how it's gonna actually play out. But historically, the cable board has been a body in which consumers can approach and complain. And the way it is currently written, and it is also, we have a draft ordinance, I should bring that next time so we can discuss it, to keep that idea that the cable board is a mediator between the consumer and Comcast, because I cannot see any way for the cable board to be an adjudicatory body. You know, that would have to
Right.
come from the legislature almost, you know. But it can encourage Comcast to do the right thing, right? And so when we have a yearly schedule, but then we have individual contracts based on the year that that person signed up, I believe it's easier for the cable board to enforce that, because then you just look at that individual contract and see what the price is and when it started and so on.
Sure.
I mean, I think that as a practical matter, a lot of it is about consumer education. So the reality is that Comcast, we get complaints on our complaint hotline that the consumer will sign up and many times, it's not infrequent, that their prices go up way short of a year. So then the customer calls Comcast, and Comcast says, oh, we'll put you on another promotion. But what the city is trying to do is create some regularity and some kind of discipline on this company so that those customers that don't call will benefit overall from a more stable pricing regime. And then the customers that experience the higher price, you know, notwithstanding, you know, maybe they called and they didn't get an offer to, you know, be put on a promotion. I'm not sure how that would happen, but I'm sure it does. Then the customer who experiences that could come to the cable board, and the cable board could probably help that customer out.
Okay.
I say that because I've had the occasion to help customers out in that way. And I think that the public process is better than me in my office helping individuals, because this is a consumer education process. It involves our community, it involves you're very generous people to be here and volunteer your time. It involves you, and all of that is a better process than for me to do it. And so this is what I'm envisioning. I'm envisioning that this draft ordinance will be a lot more user-friendly, and that when consumers come to the board, there will be hooks within the ordinance that you can use to put pressure on Comcast to do the right thing. Consumer, you know, the Consumer Bill of Rights.
Right,
That's
right.
like 5 pages that give you a lot of, you know, tools.
I was looking for my copy of this and I can't find it. Do you have any other copies?
Oh, yes, of course. Yep, I have, these are extras.
I have another comment, Mr. Chairman, for Jane. Jane, do you recall in our meeting, Jane?
Jane?
Yes, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm so, you recall when I had the orientation with you, I had brought up the fact that the state is about roughly in the 20 percentile poverty rate. Well, that's our poverty rate there. And then we have a high level of seniors above the age of 70 that are unable to afford these things that are, especially the way they are converging all the technology now. Would there be some way, and I think I brought that up in our
Yes.
meeting, we could negotiate with Comcast that they make a concession for these two groups? Lower
That-
income families, and then you have.
That's a good question, and so let me give you some information, and then the board can discuss it. So, I think that, Mr. Akani came up with a good observation, which is in that lengthy draft ordinance, either in the master, neither the master ordinance nor the grant of authority contains any provisions for, discounted rates for low-income people, or whatever you feel would be the part of the constituents that should have some special price accommodations. In Philadelphia, they did negotiate a program to bridge a digital divide, and it's not free internet, but it is discounted. And Comcast has told us, their representatives, that they have a program for public housing residents. But I think that when we think about it within the city government, we would hope that we could negotiate a broader program than just the people that live in public housing, because, there aren't that many people that live in public housing compared to, how many people might benefit from such a program. And so I would say that if you want to, and you can discuss this among yourselves, if you would like to propose something like that in your resolution, you can, you can dictate something to us this evening, and we'll write it, just like Ms. Barnhardy Chavez dictated something about the adoption of the city's ordinance as is. You could say something about that. You don't really need to feel that if you're recommending something along those lines, that you need to draft the actual language. You can make a recommendation short of that. So if you want to discuss it, I really don't have information right here what the specifics of those programs are. That's the only problem here. But if you wanted to make a recommendation in general terms, I could bring samples of what other cities have negotiated. And I have to say that they probably have negotiated as a separate agreement, because I have read these ordinances very closely, and if I had seen something like that, I would have certainly popped it in there, but I didn't see it. So I'm going to have to research that separately.
Mhm.
The specifics of how that would look.
And forgive me if I forgot this, but your ordinance also has a provision that public schools are going to get
Yes,
access.
yes,
Okay.
yes. They're part of
APS.
INET.
Okay.
They're part of the INET, and also, in addition to getting cable, basic cable tier service, they get cable modem. They get a cable modem.
Now, is that per school?
Yes, for the school.
Okay.
Covers charters?
What's that?
Does it cover the charter schools as well?
I don't think it's clear. It says Albuquerque Public Schools.
Hmm.
If the charter is part of a part of APS, I would imagine it would cover it. But if it's a independent charter, I don't believe it would cover it.
I don't know that we have independent charters. They
Yeah.
all gotta be approved by the Public Education
Yes.
Board. But I think it might be useful to make sure that maybe that language is in there.
Okay.
I also have an additional comment to that. and I don't remember if I discussed that with Jane while I was with her in the office, but it has to do alongside with the Bill of Rights, which Jane is referring to. When Comcast bills a customer, and I think you are an expert in it because you have a Comcast background, and the customer, after say 2 or 3 months, unable to pay that bill, right? And the service obviously gets disconnected. Then all of a sudden, this bill shows up that's extremely hiked up, and once again, it comes back to certain income families that absolutely cannot afford that. Could there be a way where we can add language in there, or maybe even implied in the ordinance that there could be a cap on, say, once it's disconnected, they can no longer bill them in addition to that? Because it continues while the person is inactive, and I've had constituents tell me that I received a bill for like almost $297, and I asked them to disconnect this thing, or they disconnected it a month and a half ago. So there has to be some regulation vis-a-vis that, because we run into so many individuals that you know, if you see nightmare stories on that, and they're just unable to afford it. So if there's a cap, and if we could even imply that at some point, maybe they could consider capping that, where if it's disconnect, because everything is instant now. They can turn the service on instantly, they can turn it off instantly. So the billing should be shut off instantly at the same time. And that's one of the concerns I wanted to bring up. There's a whole host of things in the Bill of Rights that once you mention that, they just start popping up, because I must have spoken to at least.
I can still add that in the Bill of Rights.
Could you?
So
Yes.
is it that they're
Oh,
not
excuse
keeping a record of when somebody says, turn off my service, and they continue to bill them? Is that what's happening?
When someone is unable to pay their bill, they get a notice saying that you are overdue. And then the service continues while the overdue notice is on.
Right.
So either they can shut it off completely and say, okay, we won't bill you past this date because you have received the notice, but the amount starts to balloon on that individual. And I just say that because there are so many families that are unable, it comes down to either eat or pay the bill. They come to a position like that. And you know, we can discuss, that's another debatable thing. Well, why'd you put yourself in that position? We're not gonna get into that debate. I'm just trying to look after an actual constituent that says, look, I couldn't pay the bill.
Right.
Could you cap it at a certain point, rather than keep ballooning it to the point where it's unaffordable?
Once that person calls and says, I want my service disconnected,
Correct.
from that date, that's when the bill should stop.
Correct.
See, that's what I'm thinking. If a person is just ignoring their bill, and it
Mhm.
mounts, I'm not sure we can reward that kind of behavior, you know?
It won't
But
be
if we,
reward, but I think since it's an instant on and off switch there.
but they have to make, the consumer would need to make it clear that that's what they want. Now,
And that's the hard thing to prove.
I can get behind an idea that Comcast has to keep records of when they get a phone call saying, stop my bill, and that they should be held to stopping the billing once, or stopping my
Stop the
service.
combat.
Once that they get that,
Yep.
that call.
And
I don't
that's
know,
specifically what I was referring to, is when they would call,
yeah.
the bill still, the billing still, the payment still continues to bill.
And in some cases, I might say that if they're under a contract, like one of those special promotions that is a year contract, there's a, you know, no get out of jail free card. They get to pay a certain cancellation fee. So that can't be helped because they've signed a legal document saying, I'm gonna do a year, and here's the bill. I've said, turn it off here, but the bill expands because now you've got a cancellation fee. So there are certain circumstances, and I would say, and in my opinion, that that's a case that maybe this board would hear on a one-to-one, them to us situation, rather than trying to tell Comcast every time they turn it off. As Sandy has said, it may be that they just ignored the bill. It could be like you were saying, where they just can't afford the bill. And they've gotten themselves in a problem that, you know, a lot of people can't tell what's going to happen next month, you know, am I going to be out of work? And so they don't know. So there are circumstances to follow through with that, but in those situations, I think this board would be the way to handle that. Thoughts?
So, my position again, I could get behind adding to the Consumer Bill of Rights that Comcast has to keep track of the phone call saying, stop my service, and has to honor that. And I agree that other issues probably need to be done on an individual basis, on a one-to-one basis.
I still have concerns over the billing issues with Comcast, and
Oh, yeah.
and I ran into that a lot with individuals that they, you know, swear
Yeah.
that they weren't doing anything wrong, and you can't help but to feel for the
Oh, I agree.
individuals.
I agree
Because,
wholeheartedly. I was one of them
Yes. and
many
it's-
years back.
So,
So,
Yeah.
I agree, and that's why I think that this board should recommend to the legal department that item number 4 on the negotiation
Proper notification.
is customer service and billing practices.
Oh.
That should be the number one concern of the city.
There we go.
Okay, I've got that.
It is this one right here.
correct, yeah.
You know, could I provide you all a little bit of information on what you all are saying? In terms of how those concerns can be drafted, when I was first listening to Mr. Akani talking that, I was thinking along the lines of what Sandy Barnard Chavez was, you know, I was translating it the way you did, which is that the ordinance can have some language in it that says that once a customer notifies Comcast that the service should be terminated, then Comcast should confirm that the billing will stop that day. And Brian, Mr. White also said the same thing. In terms of what Mr. Akani is talking about, actually, Danielle and I received a complaint last week. We don't really receive a lot of complaints about people who are past due and are threatened with termination. But this one caught my eye because we hadn't seen a lot of those. And it made me think of legal aid days when, you know, there were two ways to defend against terminating somebody's services. And, you know, and I'm thinking about utility services, which are probably viewed by the legislature as at a higher level, you know, a little more critical than, you know, cable, except that with the convergence of technology and you have people who are subscribing and have their phone service and their internet service tied into that subscription, then I think that it becomes more critical, you know, the service becomes more critical. So what I was thinking about was that back in the day in legal aid, we had two ways of defending. One was on a medical, you know, if there's a medical, and then that's statutory for electricity. I think it's also in the telephone statute that if there's a medical condition and you can get a statement from your doctor that you need the service to address medical issues, that they can't shut it off. And so that's, Comcast does not have anything, so Comcast is not regulated by the state government the way electricity and telephones are.
Right.
The other thing I thought about back in the day of legal aid was that sometimes I would negotiate with the utility to reach a settlement agreement, you know, with the customer. And that sometimes I would weigh in and say, you know, the settlement agreement you're proposing is not really fair. and you can get your money back if you did this, and gave the person a little more time. So then, when this person last week asked the city to help in her situation, and I don't know her background, I did call, I emailed the Comcast customer service supervisor and asked, what are your policies on this? Do you have some policy about settlement agreements? And he didn't answer that question. He didn't say they had a policy, but he did say that they had offered that customer settlement agreement. So that is something that we could think about writing something like that into the customer bill of rights, that they have to offer a reasonable settlement agreement. Those were in the regulations covering electric utilities, but somewhere between, when I stopped working for legal aid in 1999 and now, they took that away, so it's not there anymore. But we can put it in, or we could try and get it in. So you can discuss that.
I like that
You don't like that idea?
idea. I do.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I like it. Did they used to have a cap on how much you'd have to owe before they would start to
No.
negotiate? So could it just be 1 month's delinquency?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, of course, you have to remember the electricity can only terminate after a certain amount of time has gone by. And I don't remember what those rules are.
Right, they have to give you the
It-
shut-off notice.
And then you have to get a notice, big time. They require, a notice where the person goes to the house
Mhm.
and tries to let them know.
But that's the,
That's electricity.
yeah. I like the idea of negotiation for the customer in their customer support or service department, and negotiating a settlement with them. Something's always better than nothing from a big business standpoint, because you can't take blood from a turnip, isn't that the line? So if somebody is remiss on being able to make their payments to Comcast, a negotiation from Comcast to that constituent would be advisable. So yes, some kind of, something in the Bill of Rights would be great, I think. That way we're covering so many bases at that point.
I'm
If I
thinking
may.
that this is getting kind of complicated. It's hard to vote on it now.
Right,
I think we'd have to do it next time, but you can discuss it.
right. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Okay.
I agree with Sandy that what the city's legal team has come up with for the negotiating and the contract, I think we should at some point resolve to say we agree with this, and it should go forward with the following changes, or additions, I guess, not changes
I
as
could
much
try
as.
and write this while we finish up, and let me try and write some language and see if we can vote on it. This is, see if you can, not me. This is something to do with the Open Meetings Act, and so it is on the agenda. We're talking about development of recommendations from the board, so
Right.
it is on the agenda. And so if you are able to agree to some language right here and now, and we have noticed this as a, public meeting, open meeting, people have noticed and they're here, you can vote on it. But I cannot write this up and have you vote on it in 2
Tonight,
weeks
right.
outside of meeting, so we'd have to wait for the next.
Sure, understood.
So should I try and write something?
No offense, but it's already 20 to 7. And I think that my preference would be to let you have some time to take what you've heard us concerned about and write it up for us to vote on at the next meeting.
Well, that's
Right.
up
Can
to
I-
the members.
Let me interject.
I'll do
real
it
quick.
either way.
I think the key, as the board, if I'm hearing it, we're all in favor of customer service and billing practices, information, the Bill of Rights, the Customer Bill of Rights should be right up there as a priority in the negotiating. Am I hearing right?
Correct, yeah. That would be the premise of that conversation.
So I move
And it's an
that,
important, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think that's an important conversation. I think it has to happen. If, I understand we're kind of coming up on 7 o'clock. I would like to continue this at possibly the next meeting and keep going forward so we can actually come up with a real language where it feels right to all of us.
Okay.
And then we can make the recommendation based on that.
I have another idea that I can convey to the negotiating team and the attorney who's going to be representing the city at the table, Nan Winter. I can present her with the minutes where we can convey, or the board, not we, the board can convey that its top priority, number one concern is the Consumer Bill of Rights,
Mhm.
and urging the adoption of the city's draft ordinance in its entirety. And we can put that in the minutes and convey that to the negotiating team, and then the
Okay.
next time we work on these
The
other.
actual resolution to.
The actual resolution and these other topics, and I will draft that before the next meeting, circulate it among
Okay.
you all, and then we can put it together with the agenda and you can vote on it next time. But at a minimum, we can get across those top two concerns right away,
Right, exactly.
through the minutes.
I mean, they're all very, very important objectives. I totally agree with you in every one of these. However, I think the most important, because we're here to serve the city of Albuquerque, the people, and look for their best interests. So that should be number one.
Right,
do you need a motion and
yes.
Could we do a motion to delay this thing, or how does that work?
I don't want to do that.
No.
No,
To
they're
delay
meeting
the-
on
delay the
Thursday.
negotiations yeah.
They're meeting on Thursday
Okay.
to talk about what their priorities are gonna
Okay,
be.
okay.
So we should make sure we get our 2 cents in.
Okay.
Um, I move that we authorize Jane Yee to convey to the city's negotiating team that the board recommends adopting the ordinance as drafted in its entirety, and that the board is heavily recommending that the that the Bill of Rights, the Consumer Bill of Rights, be the #1 priority.
I second.
All right. Any more discussion on that? Okay.
Could I ask a question? Is it possible? I want to apologize for being late. I didn't realize this meeting was happening until the last minute. I couldn't cancel my other meeting.
Would you like to step forward
Is
real
it all
quick?
right?
And before you do, would you please sign in?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for holding this. I appreciate it. It's very informative.
Now, this discussion is still entailing the Comcast, negotiating with Comcast for their franchise.
Exactly.
Okay.
And if I can just pass these to you folks. So very quickly, I hear this as the issue of the consumers, which I'm so grateful that that's what you care about. My problem with that statement is that in general, when you speak to that, you never talk about that 44-cent tax that is being deducted from every single cable subscriber every month who is in Albuquerque. And that 44-cent tax is specifically for the public access station.
And actually, that was brought up before, I think you may have come in. That's part of the negotiating. That's not the #1 that we
No,
just
and I understand.
discussed.
So just the point I wanted to make is just, I just want to clarify what is meant by public access. Because public access versus how the station's current operator is operating it is the difference between private and for-profit and public. And one of the things I've noticed in the documents when the current contractor talks about their programming, meeting their programming requirements, they talk about the ProView station. That is an entirely for-profit sports channel. None of those hours can be counted towards public access hours. So I just want to make sure that when we're negotiating this whole process, that we're very clear on what constitutes public programming, what constitutes public access, what constitutes public property, because as far as the public is concerned who has been turned away from getting their shows actually presented, it appears that the current operator is operating a for-profit private entity. So I would just like to make sure that whatever is done in terms of this PEG channel negotiations, I don't care which contractor gets it. I want a fair, open process. But I want it to be very clear to the people involved what public access is. And currently, the current contractor is maybe meeting 10 hours of actual public access content as it is required in the contract. So I want to make sure that the folks involved in the negotiations for the next contract understand what that means, because you can't possibly select the proper contender for the contract if you don't understand what public access programming, not private and for-profit, what public access programming is. So,
Understood.
And the only other thing I want to say to you, Jane, because we talked about this before and you've done so much research on it, you had talked before about how you'd looked at stations like, I think, Seattle, where they had done like fiber optics or something, and they were, because of the supplier of it, they were now able to negotiate for their own station, for their own sort of cable rights, instead of having to rely on someone like Comcast. And I remember you talking about that in the early days. And I was wondering, why can't New Mexico, especially Albuquerque, if what we did was tear up Central partially to install fiber optics, and all the cities that have fiber optics have now been able to negotiate their own private channels, why are we even arguing about Comcast at this point? And that's just my public general question. So thank you very much. I'm so sorry I was late.
Thank you, Laura.
That actually brings me to, we have on our agenda the RFP process. And I think we had asked you at the last meeting if we would be able to get a copy of that. And
Well, okay. It issued yesterday, and Danielle and I tried to get a copy, and we could not get a copy. So I'm going to have to get you a copy separately, like after the meeting.
Okay, you could let
Okay.
me know.
Yes.
Before we go too much farther off track here, all in favor of the motion to,
Yeah.
to have Jane Lee work up what we had just discussed, say aye.
Hi.
In a resolution form, right?
Yes,
Okay, I will do that.
thank you. Okay.
So we actually have two motions, the one that Sandy did on the authorizing me to convey that the board recommends the adoption of the ordinance in its entirety, and number two, that the Consumer Bill of Rights and other provisions for consumer protections are the number one priority in the negotiations. So I will convey that to the negotiating team and to Nam Winter. And then secondly, the motion was to prepare a resolution with the other concerns that the board discussed today.
The additions.
In addition, right,
Right.
and provide it for you before the meeting next time for a vote at the meeting in April 24th?
24.
The 17th.
17th.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
we went back to 17.
Okay,
I know,
Okay.
sorry, all right.
I got
it.
stuff dripping out my ear now. Okay, I got too much information.
Okay,
Okay, so item 6, we just discussed.
You need to ask for a vote on that second motion.
Okay, was that, did we make a motion on the second motion? The second idea?
you can do that, but I'll do it anyway. No, I mean, you can.
I thought they were kind of combined myself. Rather
Well,
than,
those are two separate actions. One is to convey to the negotiating team those two more basic
Right.
recommendations, and the second is to prepare a resolution that has the more detailed recommendations.
Okay. All in favor of having Jane work on the resolution and bring it to the board's next meeting, say aye.
Aye.
It passes. Okay. Item 6, the update on public access, RFP, as, is this, Jane, that I picked up off there, is that where people can go to take a look at it, the RFP?
Yes. I think maybe Danielle, can you explain this process?
When you click on that link, it takes you to register in SciCommNet,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to register as a business, and then you can get in and see the RFP.
Well,
I'm
I
gonna
can't
check
do that.
into how other people can look at it, because I'm one of those other people.
Yeah.
And I work for
Well,
the
right
government.
on.
Yeah, right.
I would appreciate it.
I will. I'll check on that for you all and for myself.
Steve's got a copy of it printed,
Yeah.
If you want to see it.
pass it around.
Considered responsive. Okay. So, currently, we do not have any formal information on the RFP to present to the board. Is that correct, then?
Correct. When we wrote this agenda, I thought I might be able to bring a copy, but I couldn't. Oh,
I'll,
see?
I'll scan it.
However, someone in the audience,
Or how about if
Thank you.
I scan it and email it to you, then we can forward it?
Can we have it? Can we?
Can we make a copy of it before I leave?
Okay.
You know, if she can make a copy of it, but put some notes on it.
Could you make several?
Yes.
if it's truly that thick, I don't know that we'll be able to
It takes a while.
We're not
make
getting through
any
that tonight.
discussion on it tonight. And so I move that we table it until our next meeting. That was a motion.
I second it.
Okay. All in favor of updating, getting an update on the public access RFP, say aye. Aye. Item 6 is moved to the next meeting. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss? Jane, we had talked about adding a general category.
I don't know what happened to that, huh? I'm
Yeah, I
sorry
pulled mine
about
off the
this.
web. But I've asked Jane to include an item at the very bottom of each agenda.
Other?
As a collect all, any other general discussions that we need to bring up to the board.
Can we do that?
All right, so under the Open Meeting Act, I did try, check on that, and, you know, I typed it in, but I think we must have used a different, there might have been a couple of different drafts, and so the one that I typed it in on didn't make it in. I checked with our experts on open meetings, and they said that we could have a general category as long as we put in something like scheduling agenda items for next time. So it's more of a procedural category than a substantive category. It has to, you know, we can have a general category, a category for general discussion, but it has to have a little bit more meat on it than just general, than just the word general.
Okay.
So that's why, when, you know, and then for the public purpose, for all you out there, I don't communicate with all three of you at any one time, but when I wrote you the email, Brian,
Right.
that's what I said, that we
I
have to add
remember.
those extra things in.
Right.
And we'll have to do that next time.
We have to be a little more specific than
Than
so
just
general.
Right.
And it has to be about the meeting itself. It can't have a subject matter that we haven't discussed yet. Is that correct?
No, correct. Or it could
Okay.
be about agenda items for next time, you know.
I have a request about the timing of the public comment. I think it makes more sense to allow public comment, frankly, after the board has discussed some of the more substantive issues so that people can comment on what our thoughts are before we finally adjourn.
I agree with that idea. To move it down almost to the last thing.
Should be the
That
second
last
thing,
item.
I think.
How do you feel about that?
Second last, yeah, before you adjourn, I think that's probably
You like
a sound thing to do,
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. You want to make a motion on that?
I move that public comment be moved further down on the agenda to right before adjournment.
I second that.
All in favor of moving the public comment portion of the board meeting to just before adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
It passes. All right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting is
Wait,
adjourned.
wait, wait. I move that we adjourn.
Ah. Very good.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. This meeting is now adjourned.